It's great that there's people here. I mean, I would be happy to sit and have a drink with you anyway, but it is a festival.
It is the best that such exchange is being witnessed
Absolutely.
and recorded, and it's very important to have that.
Just in case, things get litigious in the future. we have witnesses. How are you?
I'm good, a little bit nervous. I've been saying that since forever. I'm always I've been saying this, this morning they kind of posted this, this is going to be an event, and then this is on Twitter. So I retweeted it, I said, I'm aiming to not have a panic attack. And that's how I always go about things. I'm very low, or maybe I will have a panic attack. In that case, it's just like a realistic expectation. But let's say I will not have a panic attack, and that will be a success.
Okay, well, we'll see what happens. I mean, I think you're going to be fine. But I also think if you do have a panic attack, it would be sad for me because you'd get all the attention. I'd just be kind of sulking in the corner of an ambulance and everything, and everyone thinking about you. Oh, the poor thing, blah, blah.
Yeah, that's a very good point, actually.
And I love your writing.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and I just find it so. So I read *Strange Beasts of China*. Are you familiar with the book *Strange Beasts of China*? Well, it's wonderful. It's sold out of the bookshop now, actually, but you can get it. I actually listened to it. Did I tell you that?
Yeah, they made it into audiobook in the States, but probably you could buy it here because it's all been purchased online nowadays.
Yeah, because it came out. So you wrote it how many years ago?
17 years ago.
17 years ago.
That's insane.
When you were 5 years old. She was 5 years old.
No. Oh, actually, no, it's 16 years ago when I was 21 years old, and then you can work out my age. And it was very strange, actually, in the sense now it's being translated, and then it's such a gap. Like I was saying, I pretty much have to make up stories, especially since they came out last year. I was doing promotional events, and then they asked me to say, so how did this come about? What inspired you? I'd be like, okay, let's make something up.
Yeah, because that's when I heard about it, because I live in America, and it came out in America last year, and then I guess I looked you up, and I found a piece about you in the Irish Times, which was, celebrated Chinese novelist moves to Ireland.
Oh, I know. They kind of did an interview, kind of a word chat, and I thought, that was nice of them. But then it was published a day before Valentine's Day, so they tweaked it. Then the title was "She moved to Mayo for love," and and then immediately, me and my husband were contacted by this local TV. It's no RTE or anything. It's this. I was like, would you guys want to come on our Valentine's Day special and talk about your love story? And we're like, oh no. Naturally, we didn't do it. That's why we're still in love. But it's I don't even live in Mayo. I live in Dublin.
Yeah.
But it's my husband is from Mayo. I suppose if it's written, by somebody from Dublin, that person has to mention that I have a Mayo tie, otherwise.
Yeah, because they're trying to make it seem not so Dublin-based with the Irish Times or something.
I think they're, what? Well, I'm a well-trained Irish or Mayo wife who's so entrenched in this GAA drama. So
oh right.
So I'm
I didn't even get that reference.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Mayo and Dublin. Well, not that Dublin cares about Mayo, but Mayo cares so much.
Right. Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah. So you see, I'm so well-trained. Just a miserable GAA wife. My summers are
How long did you live in Ireland?
Just 3 years, actually.
3 years?
Yeah. But I was just talking to somebody else about how open, how lucky it is for a fiction writer to be able to live in a country like this, where people are so ready to have a heart-to-heart with you at any moment. You're in the queue, and then somebody in front of you are just so this is my life story, and then 5 minutes you're great material. So then I feel like I was so lucky, and I was here for. It's not a very long period of time, I would say, but it's like, it's great. Like it's so vibrant. Like everybody talks to me a lot.
Wow. Do they know that you're a writer when they're talking to you, do you think?
Well, like in my husband's hometown, I'm known as Aunt Hickey's daughter-in-law. So it's like, oh, that's their daughter-in-law. She's, from Asia. So but then they talk to you regardless. It's like,
That's gas. Because there is a little bit of danger of being a writer, isn't there? Like that you, or like at least my friends that are writers, I'm sometimes a bit careful. Like I don't want them to take my life.
But like, see, that's a very interesting question because, you also write and you're like, I don't know how to like...
Non-fiction?
A comedian or actor, like, you kind of, you also take materials from people around you.
I know.
So I wonder how would... Because we had like, and then, so how do those people, like, how are they coping?
Yeah, grand. I mean, I think, we were going to read a little extract and I'll read a bit that's about my family and then I can maybe answer that question after. Because it's like, because then it kind of illuminates what I do when I write about my family, I think.
Yes.
Okay, I'll give it a little, it's just like that much, so. Oh, also, I listened to your book at 1.2 speed.
Oh.
Yeah, I didn't realize, and I was thinking, this is how, I just didn't know that was the setting on my phone. Oh. And I was thinking, wow, she's a fast writer. Like, I was so confused. I was like, is this something about the translation? Because that book had initially been written in Chinese. I was like, this is fascinating, something about the translation. And I was like, no, it's my stupid phone. Anyway, so I'll read this quickly. Or not quickly, just normally. Okay. I wasn't always best friends with my siblings, certainly not as a child. I had running battles with both my older sister and my closest in age younger sister. So I'm one of 8. My older sister was a stealth bomber, quieter and cleverer than I. When my family took a day trip to Middleton, which is a town 30 miles drive away, they accidentally left me behind. That day, we spent a long time in a carpet shop. I was about 6 and I didn't notice the rest of my family leaving, immersed as I was in the swirling floral rugs of the 1980s. When I did notice, I couldn't believe it. I remember walking around the shop, through the long swinging halls of hanging carpet, unable to comprehend that they had all just gone. Just like that, all those siblings, both parents, they'd vanished. Because we were in the same classroom, in the same school growing up, and we really only went on play dates to our cousins' houses, I'd never been without a family member before in my life. I decided to stand very still and hope nobody noticed me, convinced I would get in trouble with the shop owner for being there alone. Me laughing at myself. Nobody noticed my presence in the shop or my absence in the car. Well, eventually they did, otherwise I wouldn't be writing this book. I'd be the heiress to a rug fortune, having no doubt been adopted by the carpet king of Middleton. As my family pulled into our driveway after a successful outing, meaning no money spent, 3 hours passed, no fights in the back seat, my mother realized I wasn't there. "Where's Maeve?" she asked. So I was 6 then, and my 9-year-old sister replied a little too calmly, "Oh, Maeve, she's back at the carpet shop." As if I was her interior designer and she'd left me there with her credit card to pick up a rug. She was too busy to select. So, so like I think I write about them like fondly. And I hope that that's like enough to cover I don't like go there with family stuff because I'm like scared to.
Yeah.
And they're identifiable, you see, so it isn't fair. And like I feel like Colm Tobin wrote a whole book about like when our mothers are dead or something. Do you know what I'm talking about? Because he's always like, you can't be free until your mother is, gone. Like, if you're, but I don't. I feel like, well, I have all these sisters as well who would also be mad at me. So,
Yeah. That's so. Because I was thinking about that bit you just read was like brilliant. Because I was telling Maeve like I got this book and then my son became like was oh what's in the parcel? So then I took it out and I began to read. Incidentally, the first essay
first
there,
one,
then out loud to both my son and my husband. Now I realized how lousy of a job that I did. But in spite of me being a terrible reader, both of them really enjoyed that immensely. And this had become, like, since I got the book, has become like a little family ritual that after dinner, instead of putting my son on TV, I'd kind of read a little bit of Maeve's book to both of them. And
isn't that cool?
I thought it was. I wasn't sure if I should tell her this because I felt she might feel, how dare you, implying that a 5-year-old my book is liked by. And I was like, but it was really but having heard what you just read out loud, I was like, oh yeah, and I was like, oh no, what I did to them, this is not fair for Killian and Daniel. They kind of didn't get even remotely the best version.
No, not at all.
But yeah, because I was quite interested in the very sense, like why we're paired. Obviously, I was like so excited. I was like, oh,
me too.
But at the same time, I'm like, why? Because I write fiction. My biggest thing is like I cannot write personal essay in the sense because I've been writing fiction for so many years, and I think I don't have a real version. Like my memories are like all fake, or like fabricated to my own convenience.
Of course.
I think. Yes, that's like fundamentally everybody does that. But if anyone asked me to write a personal essay, I'd always tweak it a little bit, kind of treating it as if it's a piece of fiction, because the ultimate goal is to just make it like more story-like. Kind of, you want to have this narrative arc, and it doesn't matter. So I don't really think about people's feelings. For so many years, my dad have been the biggest comic, miserable character in my writing. It's like if I want to make fun of somebody, there's always, it's almost like, the dad, like in Peppa Pig.
Yeah.
So he's like,
he's kind of bullied by the by Peppa
So
and he's like a laughing stock, and he gets frustrated.
Doesn't do anything appropriately. So that's like my dad in all of my writing, and he's kind of like. And now that place has been replaced by my husband. But I thought. Because I thought
do you get away with that? Or do people ever pull you up and say, because you have the shield of, this is fiction, although a lot of women particularly do get accused of, it's all autobiography at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think I'm really thick-skinned. Like, I've pretty much used everybody in my family. So it's like, I've written a number of books in Chinese, and then... And then pretty much like, I wrote about my own sort of experience, and sometimes like being more kind of making them more like a fantasy-like, but fundamentally, I'm writing from my own experience. And then I read about my paternal family, and then I wrote about my maternal family, and then I'm like, oh no, I'm out of materials. That's why I switched to writing English and started writing about my in-laws.
Watch out, Mayo.
I'm such a, and then only recently somebody brought it up to say, oh, but how would those people feel? I was like, what are you talking about? They're just materials. Like in my head, I didn't say that. That would be like pretty much of a sociopath. But I just like, it sounded in my head, I was like, surely those are just materials. I was like, that is a very good question. I really genuinely never thought of it to the extent. I'll tell you what I did to my dad, my poor dad. So I was living in the States at one point and decided to write a novel for like various reasons, and I would skip that. But then
money, obviously, a lot of money in novels.
No, not really, but like. But then I decided. So this novel were written. So the narrator is like the daughter. So it's I am the daughter. So then every character in the novel were addressed as like dad, mom, granny. So then the protagonist of the story of the novel is dad. So essentially, the story is about dad sleeping with all the women in town, and he has like a mistress, and he installed his mistress upstairs to where Granny lives. So whenever he goes to see his mistress, he says to Mom, "I'm going to my mom's." And he is kind of going to his mom's. So this is like kind of quite a scandalous, like vulgar story. And then the protagonist like Dad. And that Dad, aside from the fact of being promiscuous, I'm not saying that my dad is not, it's just like I don't know about those things. So like I'm not aware of those, so I cannot testify for. But aside from that,
I can tell you your dad is very, no, I'm just kidding.
But aside from that, it's pretty much my dad.
Really?
Like the character's mannerism, the character kind of goes about things like the way he talks and all the other. So then, that was actually kind of like my biggest book in China. So then, and it became quite successful. And think about my poor dad, like living in my hometown, being laughed at, like teased by his friends, his buddies, for being this dad. Because then, so then this fictional dad has like a name, and then apparently my dad started being called that name in my hometown. And I didn't care about any of that. Just like a sociopath. I'm like, surely that's just materials. I was just purely excited that I had this great idea.
Oh my God, I do think really great writers have ice in their veins. I do think that actually. And I'm glad. I'm glad. So wait, like, can I ask you a quick thing? Because I do want to hear what you're going to read as well. But I'm going to ask you kind of an obvious question, because I think one reason we were paired is that like we're from one place and we moved and experienced other places. And a really great nonfiction writer, David Sedaris, who I love, he said that in an interview like many years ago. He was like, it's so good for a writer to leave where they're from and to, you know, because you're just have to observe. I mean, you have to observe what's happening around you. I think when you grow up in a place, it's so familiar, you can like barely even see it. And then you're just forced to be like a little bit on the back foot and just to be very watchful, which is kind of a good...
Yeah, and also when you write about the scandals around you, and they will not be able to physically hurt you because you're like so far away.
Yeah.
When you use them as materials, they'd be kind of like fumed, but they wouldn't be able to.
No, they can't get
you. Because I wrote that novel, like the first chapter was finished and it was published in a journal. And apparently, I only learned, like my dad Googles me from time to time. So then I didn't share that with him, but he found it, like the first chapter. But it was like bad enough for him because his dad and stuff. And he was so upset, and he sent me an email in which he addressed me with like my full name. It's a sign of him like in full rage.
Right.
But my dad did not know how to make an international phone call. He was unable to vent at me.
You're like so happy.
He did not know how to make an international phone call. I was in the States, and he was like, I demand you to call me now. We can sort this out. And I kind of disappeared for a while until I finished the novel.
So you didn't change it after even you knew he wasn't happy with the first?
No.
Yeah.
Sorry. It's like, I cannot justify for this sociopathical behavior.
But it's also your experience, you see, that's the thing.
No, it's not about my dad. It's not about him. It's about, I think, I wanted to write this story, and it's for, I think I was writing from, if I'm being serious, if I'm allowed to be serious for a moment, I was writing from a feminist point of view, like a feminist place, I think. Now looking back, especially, I think I was really writing back as a young woman against all the horrendous experience I've witnessed or sometimes even experienced from being surrounded, because I think literary circle, or maybe every circle, is quite of a patriarchal circle, and then it was very difficult for me. I got published very young, like to inhabit in that surrounding as like a young woman, and then that kind of I think it's me kind of writing back to that. So then I really wanted to create this horrendous man who's promiscuous, vulgar, self-absorbed, you name it. And I think it's like a blessing that I kind of sort of created this character out of my dad, because I love my dad. So I kind of think by doing this, by kind of creating this like anti-hero out of the archetype of my dad, it helped me to kind of complete the mission impossible, is to write a terrible person but also loving that person as a writer. So I think to me that was like a perfect formula to have that mission complete. So I really disregarded, sadly, my dad's feelings. I was like, sure, that doesn't matter. This is very important. This is very important what's going on.
Yeah, because like we could all write some kind of monster, but like if you don't humanize it, then it just feels
because that's the
like,
protagonist,
right?
And I felt I felt quite. I feel it was my mission. Like I think I wrote that novel when I was 26 years old. I think as a young woman, I was really kind of repelled. I couldn't help by this character, and I was trying to write, but I wanted to make people like him. I do not want to condemn him or to kind of. I do want to condemn him, but to condemn him in fiction would be inappropriate. So I wanted to create him in the fiction in kind of like this neutral space where you could decide either to love him or to condemn him. Like my intention as a writer is irrelevant in a sense.
Right.
So I do want to love him then in that sense, because I wanted to create him with care.
Yeah.
And I think that man being very much like my own dad, whom I love dearly, is really helpful. But of course, my dad couldn't see that. He was like, "How dare you tarnish my name?" And it's like, yeah. But then you see the story. The twist of that story is that I wrote the whole. So then, when the whole novel was finished and it was published, and then I was still in the States, so I went back to China. Maybe like a month after the whole thing was published, and then my dad had read that at that point, and he came to pick me up at the airport, and we hadn't spoken at that point for so long because of this incident. He was, infuriated, and I refused to call him back. So I was actually quite nervous, thinking, oh, what's going to happen? And he saw me, and he gave me a big hug, and then we went back home, and he sat down, and he lit up a cigarette, and he finished his cigarette. He said, I read the whole thing, because he came out, and he said, it was a great novel, you did a good thing. And it was like, because my dad was like a literary person, and he's like an editor. And so that was a big moment to me that he was able to recognize, in spite of kind of being borrowed and like into this horrendous story. And yeah.
I mean, even if he didn't, I think you'd probably be just as happy, would you? Or not just as happy,
I think I
but
will
like,
be. I will be bothered. I will be bothered.
Your personal life, like,
and also what Tobin said. I like what you said. Tobin said. It was true because my mom, she has passed away many years ago. So I do think it's because the lack of the mother. Because I was talking to somebody else. I think if my mom were still around, I wouldn't be able to write a novel, kind of almost making fun of dad having affairs. But it was because that void, and it kind of, I didn't need to care about how she felt about it.
I see.
I think it was I was at a very good, like artistically, at a very good vantage point. It might be, it definitely is like a personal tragedy, but at the same time, I think as artist, thanks to, like, Tobin was right.
Yeah, isn't it wild how, because I have to really fight that sometimes, that urge of thinking, oh, well, something bad has happened. The loss of a parent when you're young is like very tragic, but I mean, even in smaller things like a breakup or another, and you kind of think like, it's material, and like in a way that gets you through it, but in another way I wonder if that's healthy or not, or like does that even matter anyway?
Yeah.
Like, because we were talking earlier about the immediacy of like, so I would write about like some immigrant story that I interviewed the person, found out their story, put it in context, published it. And then that's like it. Like, I don't know how I process that, or how, or is it just like you just churn it out if you're writing nonfiction? Whereas like with fiction, I wonder if it's you process it more. And like,
I feel it's because I read it and I was first kind of, obviously I wasn't expecting reading a book like now, and it's about COVID.
Yeah.
Like the distance, like the temporal distance is quite short, and I wasn't expecting that. But I think I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I like I was saying to you, I feel it almost like de-traumatized me while I'm still kind of, while this event is still going on, and it soothed me. And I think it's because as a writer, you have that power, you have that. It's really like, I think it's a personal. It's an artistic capacity to be able to absorb and then to kind of hold all that energy. And I was about to say, like, with reading your essays, like in this book, and I think the great thing about it is everything reads so easy, as if, you were just like sitting in front of me, like, figuratively when I was reading it, and like just like telling me all those things. But it's not. It's hard work. I think, everything that seems so accessible, so easy, so casual, it's really not. So I think that is the capacity, the ability, for this. I feel bad, like I feel slightly embarrassed, like kind of praising somebody right in front of me. Like,
I love it. I'm like, go ahead.
Because I almost wanted to do because I think sometimes when we talk about people's writing, if the author is there, I'd always say the author. I would kind of like create this kind of persona, because you find it a bit embarrassing. I
know. But at the same time, I mean, it's okay, I think. And if anyone else wants to praise my work, Jens' work, we're going to have a Q&A at the end, but really it could just be a kind of a compliment session. And just the more adjectives, the better. I like muscular for my work. Do you like very muscular work? No, I mean, I appreciate it, and I did ask you too. Like, I did ask you, about that. So I think it's fair enough. But will we? Did you decide what you want to read, or?
Yeah. Okay. Yes, I have decided.
Yeah.
So because the book I'm promoting, I'm supposed to be, The Strange Beasts of China, the book. I have to say, I wrote it. The book's Chinese title is just Strange Beasts.
Oh,
obviously.
Because why would you? It's like
it's like somebody wouldn't
Chinese
shoot a film to say Father Ted of Ireland.
Right.
It just doesn't work that way.
Thank you for making that relatable to us. We really wouldn't have understood it all until you brought it.
So when I first moved to Ireland, I was like, I must understand the Irish psyche, so I could navigate my through updated. And it was like people were like, go watch Father Ted. So. And that's how. So that to me was like my Irish psyche 101. But I wrote it when I wrote it. It was like Strange Beasts. So but then it's being translated. They decided to call it Strange Beasts of China. And I think it's anyways. But like by bringing up that sort of that change, I'm just saying that there's a distance between me, personal, or like the writer me, or personally. There's a distance between me and the book, the English translation. So I always find it very slightly bizarre or kind of off to read translation, because it's like the translator's work. So I thought I'd just read something I wrote, and I wrote in English myself. And I thought of like reading from the short story collection that's coming out next year. It is coming out next year on June 1st.
Thank you. It's very exciting. It's published in the UK and Ireland and the US at the same time.
Yeah, I think US will be like a week behind.
Oh, okay.
So it's pretty much around the same time. But
Yeah.
I thought I was going to read that excerpt, but then I thought I would just publicly shame myself by reading a personal essay in front of a great personal essayist. And I was like, I'm not really. So but the reason for that is because this is a complete piece, and it's short, and it's like a personal essay which was commissioned by some organization in Dublin, and it was first year, COVID year one.
Oh.
and it was Christmas time, because that time, I think that Christmas, lots of people were not able to go home to kind of have Christmas with their family. So then they made this project about how Irish people having Christmas, or like something it's like a theme, and then they asked me to do it. I was like, but why? I'm married to Irish, but I'm like, yes, I'm sleeping with one of you, but like, there's a boundary. I was like, oh my ass. And then they were like, and then, so anyway, so I wrote this piece, and it's like, it's about, my Irishness, which in a sense is like coerced, but like, but as any kind of performative act, the longer you do it, the more sincere you become. So then this is a very sincere piece. I feel so you will not, you probably won't laugh. It's kind of just, so I'll go now. It's called The Seagull. The seagull. You don't remember this. The winter after you were born, I used to push you up and down the quays. You loved when our pushchair trundled on the footpath, rocking and rattling, and you'd doze off with a smile. But as soon as I stopped, you'd wake up and cry with all your strength. For this reason, I walked on and on along the river Liffey in my black coat in the winter, while the mist billowed up from the water and the seagulls flapped against the wind, shrieking in the gray and low-hanging sky. I called you my little seagull. People in this part of the world are not particularly fond of this bird, while where I come from, the name Hai-O was given to a lot of people of my generation. In fact, one of your aunts in China, who I hope you'll meet one day, is called Hai-O. Last week, when I was helping you put on your jumper, you shouted, "Seagull, seagull!" Outside the window, a large flock of white birds were hovering. This was unusual because Norwich is not exactly near by the sea. Excited, you pressed your face against the glass. "They're eating," you said. Then I saw the birds were gliding towards our neighbor's shed, rising over a pile of breadcrumbs left there. Back in Dublin, packs of seagulls would often visit our terraced house around the time of our first morning feed. I would hold your little body, listening to the birds shrilling, and I'd think of China, the apartment I grew up in, and my parents' big bookshelves, and your grandfather reciting ordinarily the song of the storming petrel. Just like you loving pulling out mine and your father's books and throwing them everywhere, I grew up surrounded by your grandparents' literary collection, both Chinese and foreign. By foreign, I mean Russian. It might sound completely strange to you, but that was, for years, the only foreign literature they were allowed to read. Gorky, Turgenev, Gogol, Chekhov. After we moved to Norwich, our neighbor who leaves bread for the seagulls was the first one who sent us a welcome card. She also attached a short note explaining that her daughter, who lived with her, had a chronic skin condition that, when flared up, caused insufferable agony. "I'm really sorry," the old lady wrote in the note, "but you might hear her cry." Recently, even you have noticed that I've been in low spirits. You asked me, "Mama, do you miss Ye and Pi Xian?" I said, "Yes, I do." "You'll see him soon," you told me, stroking my shoulder. I don't know if you know how far Pi Xian is, or whether you have any concept for distance as a 3-year-old, but at times, your childish words sound epiphonic to my ear. A few days ago, you announced, "Daddy is from Ballina, Mama is from Pi Xian, and I'm from Ballina and Pi Xian and Dublin and Norwich. I'm from everywhere." I have never told you this story, but the first time I thought your dad and I would be together was when he returned from a trip to Laos, and we met at the Green Lake Park in the city center. This park is famous for its seagulls, which, for some mysterious reason, since the mid-80s, had been migrating every winter from Siberia. And it was by the lake where the snow-white seagulls were chirping and circling. I saw your dad waiting for me. Now remember, this was in China, where I was not the foreigner, while your father, being Irish and 6'5", always stuck out as a young guizi. At this instance, every passerby stared at him as if he was an alien. I walked towards him and finally stood in front of him. He looked tired from the journey, hair long and beard thick, and he said to me in accented Chinese, "我回来了." This might only be significant in retrospect, but I believe, Killian, it was at that moment the thought crossed my mind. One day, this man and I would have a child together. That's it.
Oh. Thanks, Dan. Yeah. Thanks for reading that. Yeah. Did Killian ever? He's 5 now.
Yeah, this is like, COVID year 1.
Yeah.
He was 3.
So crazy.
It's crazy.
Wait,
yeah.
has he heard that yet or no?
No, I don't think. I hope he would never really read.
Really?
No, I don't know actually. Yeah, I think it's probably better for him to not read anything I wrote. Yeah, he does not know really what I do.
Yeah.
Like the other day I was like, what do you want to do? He said, I want to do what Daddy does. I want to be like a reporter. And husband is a journalist. And I said, why don't you do what I do? And he thought about it. He said, well, then I have to go to London a lot. He thinks my job is to go to London
Going
a
to
lot.
London.
He has no idea what I do.
Fair.
Yeah. It's just, I was, I thought it was a bit cheesy, kind of like having like sort of an essay like that. But it's for the Christmas time, so I'm like.
Oh no!
Are
you? I mean, I thought it was perfect. I mean, if you've ever heard a show called Sunday Miscellany, did you ever hear that show?
No.
It's on RT. It's a radio show, and they just get, yeah. I mean, that would be a version of. They basically. I'm not going to talk anymore about Sunday Miscellany. Just it's like a personal essay radio show. But the people who write the stories for it have been writing for they are what do you call it when like immortal? They're immortal. So they've lived for thousands of years, it seems. Then when you hear them on the radio, you're like, wow, still alive. Still writing.
Speaking of personal essay, I have like a legit, like a serious question I wanted to ask you. I even wrote it down on my laptop. Because I was thinking about like writing personal essay, and lots of people would think, oh, that's easy. I just write, what I've experienced. But like, it's not that, isn't it? It's like so not that, and I think it's all the materials, like, what's your experience were just like raw materials, and then it's about selecting. And I think the most important thing is to have a voice. So you think, I don't know, this is my feeling that in order to write a personal essay, although it's personal, but one would have to create like a person, like an I in the essay. And this I is not, because like, you're always writing looking back. It's always in past tense.
Yeah.
And it's always the I in the past at a particular point. And I think it's so important to envision that I, to kind of remember, or even in certain cases, in my case, to fabric how the I felt at that point. And it's only from creating that I and then hearing and relearning that I's voice did one begin to kind of, be able to kind of compose that voice, even though it's kind of like very casual. Like, I think personal essay is great because it's like, it's like, oh, I came on arms, and like, and it just gets you, it's kind of like you read one, you're like, oh, this is just like casual reading, it just like punch you in the gut, and I love that, by the way, I love the, yeah, but I wonder, so do you think you, like writing these essays, do you feel like you have to create like a persona of like Maeve Higgins who writes essays and
and I think it's a blend too, because you make sense of things retrospectively. You make your own version of it, obviously. It's not. It's you're deciding later that's actually what happened, and then in that as well you're also deciding, and that's who I am there, and that's who I am there. So I do think it is like making up yourself as you go along as well, and trying to control that, right? And saying, this is what I'm like, this is what I'm like, do you understand, and I do, it's funny because I just heard this like really interesting interview on a podcast with a writer who, uncovered that, the CIA had funded a lot of these, in the 1950s and 60s in the US, like these like long-form journalism. There was like a big push towards like inserting yourself in the story and like having a personal experience of something and then like writing about it from there, because and it's not like a conspiracy. It's literally the CIA funded it, and it's all out there in the open. They set up the Iowa Writers Workshop, and they funded a lot at the beginning of that. And so I was thinking, like, oh my goodness, like, because it is such a kind of, you're individualizing this experience, and you're ignoring that it's like a collective thing that's been happening. You're making it yours, which, you know, that is how I've written, and that is, you know, how I know how to write. But I've definitely been thinking like, oh, that's really interesting, because it is kind of, you know, it's very American.
Yeah,
You know? And like politically, it's not the most helpful, I think.
Yeah.
So I've just been thinking recently about the form and how, like how I enjoy it, but also how I have all of these like bigger questions, kind of like sociological questions that I'd love to answer, and I don't think this is the form to do that there. And I think weirdly it's been fiction for me. Like, I've been studying migration, right? During the lockdown, I did a master's in international migration studies. Like, I was like, I have to get my head around what this is, because I would do reporting about it, and I would do a nonfiction, but I was like, what is going on? And then, so I did this like master's, and I just tried to learn as much as I could, and I was just like, there's not really enough, that, like, this doesn't give you enough tools. Like, journalism, reporting, personal essay doesn't give you enough tools. It has to be bigger than that. But I'm not sure how though. Yeah.
Wow, this is so fascinating. I mean, I'm so envious of like multidisciplined artists, and who can just like, you know, it's like you're like an octopus, you know, sorry, it's not a pretty image.
No, I'm an octopus.
But it's like,
no, but
you're like reaching out, like constantly like morphing into different things and going different direction, that's multiplying, and it's just, it's fascinating. I'm like this one shtick. I write fiction, and I don't do anything else.
But okay, but my larger point that I kind of, in all of this trying to learn about migration, particularly asylum seeking, I then read a book, Mohsin Hamid, Exit West. Do you know that?
Oh, yeah.
It's a book called Exit West. Do you know Mohsin Hamid? He wrote The Reluctant Fundamentalist, and he's, I think, a Pakistani writer.
Did he write How to Get Rich in Filthy?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, great title.
How to get, what was it? How to get
rich in filthy, how to get filthy rich in Asia.
In Asia, yeah. But it was, did I say something? One of you said something? Very good writer, yeah, he is a great writer. But he's a fiction writer, and it was when I read Exit West that something opened in my brain where I understood the, like, asylum-seeking experience more than I had before from reading like first-person accounts and from reading journalistic accounts and from, you know, it was, I don't know what it was, but it the way he did it, it was able to shift my brain to a different understanding, a different level of it, and that was fictional. Like, he made it up. It wasn't clear. The book is about a couple, probably Syrian, like, but you have to kind of guess, who these doors open around the world. So he took the journey out of it, which I thought was really interesting, because so much of it, you know, we know about migration is the journey. I mean, in Ireland, we're like obsessed with the ideas of the coffin ships and everything. But he just like left that out. He just put in a tiny bit of magical realism. He said, okay, a door can open and you suddenly go from living, you know, in China, and then you just like appear suddenly in Australia, or you appear in. So anyway, that's a very long way around of saying fiction, of course, can reveal deeper truths than somebody kind of hammering you over the head with it and saying, this is how it is.
I think it's something very zen about what you describe about like Exit West, and how that seems to kind of have become the epiphany for you to kind of, I think it's almost like, you know, the zen moment of, because what he did in that book, and I really loved that book actually, it was, it's like he made, you know, a metaphor. He kind of, you know, not talking about the phenomenon, but instead making a metaphor. It's like a very zen move, and instead, and then, but I think it's through the metaphor, he kind of, a metaphor that really holds up the reality. It's almost like the reality is then being presented in the box of that metaphor, and then sorry for being very Chinese. I was about to say it reminded me of this quote of Confucius. so ashamed of myself.
No, it's in your contract.
Myself
It
to
is
be
in your contract.
I'm like,
yeah.
I do not want to. No, but because he also right. Anyway, so this one line actually is from I Ching, and he was talking about the sage. So the language doesn't express the meaning. So the sage set up himself. When he says the sage, that means me. Okay. This is Confucius. And then the sage, the language is not enough to express the meaning. So the sage set up the image to express the meaning. And then I think, very often I think about fiction, is that's the image. It's because the language is not enough. The words are not enough to express the meaning. Because fundamentally, meaning is kind of ambiguous, fluid,
right.
and kind of shapeless, if that makes sense. And I think what you can do to pair with that is to create an image. And in this case of Exit West, it's like a metaphor.
Right.
And I think it's when, so I think that, but obviously it takes a great talent,
right?
To write that book, to kind of find the right metaphor.
Yes.
Yeah. Isn't that so my secret dream, not so secret actually, and in my sort of friend circle, everybody knows Yan really wanted to be a stand-up comic.
Oh!
For a while I was thinking about I would just go to I heard there were school, I really wanted to go to take the train to kind of to receive the training. But it's about kind of to dissect the reality. It's I think the stand-ups were you tell a joke, but it's not really about telling the joke. It's about in that space, certainly you get the artistic license to be able to kind of dissect the reality and kind of break it down in the most brutal and attention-evoking way. And then in the end, you kind of diffuse the tension, and because of the tension were then released, and then your audience laugh. So then I thought it's really kind of but then how to find the right thing to kind of.
And there's and that's a very beautiful version of stand-up that that's an aspirational version of stand-up. I mean. All of us, if you've been to a stand-up show, it's oof, whoa, he does not like his girlfriend.
I know. It's like a punching down kind of situation.
Yeah, it's really abused, but I do think, it potentially could do some of the things you're talking about for sure. You have to do it. You're the one who has to do that, because I haven't really seen that being done. Yen, should we take some questions?
Yes, we should.
We can, I think there's a microphone if you don't want to yell, but, thanks. Does anybody have any questions or compliments? I was joking about compliments earlier, obviously. But because it's 9:28 now, actually.
Oh.
Yeah. Thank you for all listening. Yeah, go ahead.
First off, Maeve, your writing is so muscular. It should have its own category in heavyweight literary boxing. And Yen...
I can't believe you.
Yen, you're so articulate and charming and profound, and you've changed me tonight, so thank you both. But my question is, Yen, I'm reading Strange Beasts of China, and I only wish that I could read it in Chinese as you had wrote it, but my question is...
No, you don't want to.
I was just wondering why, it might be a very basic question for you, so I apologize, but I'm very interested. Why did you not translate it yourself?
Because seriously speaking, because I really am not a translator. Although I think it takes great talent, really, to be able to bridge. I cannot bridge my two languages. I don't switch easily, and I find it very difficult, say, if I want to tell my dad what happened and everything was in English, and I sometimes couldn't find the words in Chinese to tell him. So, I'm basically handicapped in that sense, so I cannot. I'm unable to translate. And also, I think I'm just very lazy. I do not want to I'm like this kind of person that I get excited by new things easily. So I kind of, move on to like from project to project very quickly. So then I think I don't think I would have the sort of patience and also the diligence to kind of go back to rework. And yeah, I'm not supposed to say that because I'm here to promote the book. I really didn't like the book. I'm like, well, thank you, Jeremy, the translator, is a very good friend of mine, basically. I went to visit Jeremy. I was in New York before I was pregnant. This was last time I was in New York. And he was there, so I met him. And then I don't know how it came about. He was like, I want you to translate this book. And he brought it up to me on Strange Beasts. And I was like, are you sure? It was such a bad book. And he was like, trust me, it's going to work. I'm like, okay. And so then he did it, and he was right. I was like, respect.
Wow.
So obviously I'm not.
Because I think that's really generous, too, because translators, maybe there's some translators, because they get so I feel like they're coming into their own now and they're getting more, but for so long it was like, oh, a translator doesn't really do much or something.
Yeah. I
They
think
do incredible.
I think in the US it's even more say in the UK, I think generally, at least the publisher here would kind of publish this particular book. They'd always put the translator's name on the cover, so you're being juxtaposed as the author, written by, translated by, so that's on the cover. In the States, they always pretend it's just a work of original English, as if having two names on the cover would trip American brains. They'd be like, what? I can't cope.
You never know. Wait, do we have time for one more? Yeah, okay, thanks. Sorry, I didn't know you were. Hi.
Hello. Think you're great. Leave it at that. Maeve, I love your comedy and your writing, and I think one of the most interesting things about it all is your ability to deal with awkwardness and an awkward silence, and I just think it takes amazing poise to do that. I think it's definitely why I prefer, say, your comedy to pretty much any man's comedy, because they're like, I have to win. But I think that yours is I'm telling my story. You can laugh if you like. So I was just wondering about that. Is the awkwardness just natural, or do you work hard at it?
Yeah.
Because it's really good.
Thanks for that. And yeah, I think, you mentioned earlier when you perform something for long enough, it kind of becomes sincere. And I think performing this type of femininity where you're just la la la, oh, I'm adorable, that's kind of an interesting spot to be in, because other people reveal themselves, and that's a very self-aggrandizing take on also being genuinely awkward. But I do think it's if you can let things be messy and let people sit in it for a minute, it's good. But I also I have to talk about this because Rosaline McDonough, do you know Rosaline McDonough? She was doing an event just before us, actually, at 6:30. I don't know if any of you saw it. It was online. And she's this really cool Irish writer, traveller woman, disabled woman, and she wrote a really great memoir, and she writes poetry, plays, she's really... But anyway, I interviewed her yesterday for something. And I started out talking to her saying, this is in my script, and I didn't catch it. And I said, oh, Rosaline, what's it like coming from the outside, being on the margins and writing da-da. And she was like, sorry, she did it so beautifully, but she said to me, that's a very settled perspective. Who am I on the outside of? Where are you? And I was like, oh my God. And she proceeded to school me, really, in a very generous
That's amazing.
way, where it really, I've been living in America for 10 years, and I've been learning so much about race stuff and and women's, just marginalize how to figure it out myself and how to talk about it and everything. And then I'd blunder in, totally unaware and totally. And like, of course, my ego is like, I straight away started thinking like, why did they give me this script? You know, like trying to like, and then I thought like, no, this is cool, this is fantastic, you know? Like, thank God she's doing this now, and like, she's even bothering to take the time. She's a doctor, she's a PhD, like, you know, this woman is brilliant, like, and you know, she was still kind of, like I said, very graciously teaching me, but at the same time, she had to teach me, like, so, I don't know. So sometimes out of awkwardness, like, you just have to take it. Like, you just have to, yeah, that's great. Like, thank you. Even though it feels like desperate for a minute. Anyway,
it's so fascinating. I mean, the way, I would totally have the same take if I were interviewing, like, to kind of describing people, I think. Kind of from, like, you know, on the periphery. And,
right.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just
right,
really taken by that, because I think everybody is on the
interview
periphery.
When it comes, everybody isn't, so we got into that then. It was like, depending on who you know, the power that shifts and moves, and, you know, obviously I can't do justice to everything she explained, but like, she was kind of saying like, when I'm at home, my family, like, speaking Cant, which is like the language, you know, again, like a third language that often in Ireland we'd say Irish or English, that's it, you know, there's another language. And so, you know, she just kind of like brought it back to her reality and pointed out that, you know, so yeah, like anyway, you know, we've missed her event here, but you can, I interviewed her, and I'll send you the interview so that you can hear it in her own words. It's way better. And you can hear me in the background. Oh, sorry. Oh, oh yeah, actually, yeah. Oh, 1 second there. Hi.
Well, thank you. It was a beautiful presentation to start with. But a hell of a lot of us here are in the autumn or maybe the winter of our years, and we have thoughts, maybe bits of poetry and bits of writing and whatever, and they've never been properly commissioned to print in a decent structure like a hardback. You have very broad range of experience. How in Ireland anyway can you produce a hardback, maybe in a limited edition, maybe 50 or 100 copies or something, at some kind of a realistic price, because we have to keep money for the rainy day at the end of our lives and things like that.
Well, that's a good way of, you know, getting somebody to publish it if you bring in that dramatic. Also,
well, it's true. It's bloody true.
I know, but you look great, though. I don't know whether you convince many people. Seriously.
And it's a realistic kind of price.
At a good price, yeah. You do know now that, because my sister Lily has a book coming out this year, and literally the cost of paper has just shot up. Anyway, so that's like a real thing, that it costs a lot to make books. You know that, obviously. But like, I do think, are you talking about self-publishing?
Well, that's what it takes.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's a brilliant thing, because so many people, younger than me now, but like people in their 20s and stuff are making zines in ways that that have come back in such a way that haven't since I was a teenager. I'm 41 now. So like there's like a big zine culture, so that they're self-publishing, right? These are smaller. You're talking about something, you mentioned hardback, and something substantial that you can kind of pass around. To the family, yeah. I mean, the most important thing is to get it down on paper, you know, and there's lots of, if it's memoir, there's like lots of guides online about questions that you ask yourself, jumping off points, and then if you've done all of that, and if you have, I don't know, 50,000 words maybe?
I think you could do self-publishing via Amazon. I'm very wary of bringing up names of big corporations, and I feel this should be like beeped if we were being recorded.
Jeff Bezos is up there. Yes. Yes. I made it to the West Cork Literary. I'm gonna buy Bantry.
But I think there were like those, I mean, it just depends, like what Maeve was saying. It's like you want to make like a souvenir for yourself, family and friends, and that's almost like a gift-making process rather than getting published. Or if you want to kind of get more people to read it, I think maybe to publish it online via some kind of a relatively accessible, maybe influential website whose name we're not going to mention again.
Amazon. But that's how that is how Amazon, and then someone can go and it won't be printed until they order it.
Yeah, and then you'd be able to kind of reach more audience.
I don't know, but I also think like lots of people your age do this all the time. It's something that's learnable. It's not. It's another skill. I know. I don't mean to be like it's easy. It's probably not easy, but it's there. It's learnable. But as for hardback, it might be something like a gift, more of a.
Yeah, I think it just depends on what you like. If it's kind of like, actually, my granny has been talking about doing something like this for years.
Oh, really?
She'd be like.
See,
but the way she asked us to do it is so. My granny, sorry, this is a detour. She'd be like, you know what? So many of my friends have asked me to kind of get my poems and my like essays published because they thought they were like so valuable, so they really wanted to have that. But then me, I'm like very humble. I'm such a modest person. I really don't want to do that. And she'd be talking on and on in front of us. Eventually, we're like, oh, you want to do that?
Yeah.
She's like, oh, but I would never do that because I'm very modest. That would just so embarrass me. But they really want it so much. You know what? Somebody else has mentioned it to me today. She like goes on.
You have to do it.
Yeah.
But the main thing is, the most important thing is that she has written, your grandmother has like written, she's written it, you've written, it sounds like you've actually written the stuff. That's the main thing,
Yeah,
the next thing is just the, icing on the cake is like getting it into people's hands.
I feel, sorry, I think I totally agree with Maeve. Like, I've heard people saying this to me a lot. It's quite often, typically after they learn that I'm a writer, they'll be like, oh, I'm writing something and I don't know if it will ever get published or like, and I think it's the best thing about writing is it's the writing itself. And that's the most important part, is you've written it. Anything beyond that point is to increase your carbon footprint.
Oh, unless it's e-published. Here we go again.
Oh my goodness, I must have taken money from Amazon. They just haven't paid me yet. The check is on the way.
This event has been sponsored by Angus. Are we done?
Yeah, we should probably,
Yeah. Well, I think all that's left is to thank everybody for putting this on. The Maritime Hotel has been so lovely, and to all the staff here and all the volunteers as well at the book festival. It's been brilliant, and there's still more events on as well. So thank you so much for having us. Thanks for making the trip from Norwich. It was just so wonderful to be with you tonight.
Yeah, it's so nice to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.